Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to drift into the soft rhythm of a world far older than any of us can imagine. Let your body sink into comfort as your mind begins to wander gently into the story of Earth, a story written not in words, but in stone, in ice, in shifting landscapes, and in the quiet whispers of time. Tonight, we journey back to one of the most mysterious, chilling, and awe-inspiring chapters of our planet's history, the Ice Age. Imagine the Earth as it once was, wrapped in a shroud of cold. Vast sheets of ice stretched across the continents, blanketing entire regions under layers so thick and heavy that mountains themselves seemed small in comparison. Snow fell endlessly, not as we know it today in light flurries and playful storms, but as relentless cascades, feeding glaciers that grew year after year, century after century. The air was crisp and thin, filled with tiny crystals of frost that sparkled faintly under the pale light of a distant sun. The world was quieter then. Life moved more slowly, shaped by the rhythm of glaciation and thaw, survival and adaptation. Great beasts roamed across frozen plains, their breath rising in gentle clouds against the icy winds. Mammoths with woolly coats trudged in herds, their massive tusks curving like ivory arcs against the snowy horizon. Saber-toothed cats prowled silently in the shadows, their long fangs glinting in the dim light. Even the small creatures, from rabbits to voles, had grown thick fur and burrowed deep into the earth to escape the bitter cold. But the Ice Age was not just a time of struggle. It was also a time of incredible beauty, of landscapes sculpted by glaciers into valleys, fjords, and shimmering lakes. Imagine standing on a ridge above a frozen expanse, where endless ice meets the horizon, glowing faintly blue under a sky streaked with pale pink and gold. The silence stretches for miles, broken only by the cracking of ice, or the distant call of a bird adapted to this world of frost. The Ice Age, in truth, was not a single moment in time, but a series of long cycles, periods when glaciers advanced, followed by times when the ice retreated and the earth warmed once again. These cycles shaped the planet in profound ways, carving the land, influencing the rise and fall of species, and even guiding the footsteps of the first humans as they spread across the globe. Tonight, we explore not only the chill of the Ice Age, but the wonders it left behind, and the mysteries it still holds. To begin, picture the Earth as it was roughly 2.5 million years ago. This marks the start of what scientists call the Quaternary glaciation, the period of repeated ice ages that has continued, in one form or another, until today. For though the great glaciers have retreated, and much of the planet is warmer now, technically we are still living in an ice age, a warmer interglacial phase, but an ice age nonetheless. The world back then was undergoing immense changes. Continental plates had shifted into positions that allowed for massive buildups of ice. Ocean currents shifted, winds carried moisture differently, and over time, the world cooled. Slowly, gradually, glaciers began to creep outward, year after year, building mile-thick domes of ice that pressed down on the land beneath. Imagine North America during this time. The northern half of the continent was covered by the Laurentide ice sheet, a frozen mass that stretched from the Arctic deep into the heart of the United States. Where cities like Chicago and New York stand today, there was only ice, as tall as skyscrapers, as heavy as mountains, pressing ever outward. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet sprawled across the north, smothering what would one day become the rolling fields of Germany, Poland, and the British Isles. Across Asia, ice crept over Siberia, while the great glaciers of the Himalayas expanded, sending rivers of frozen water flowing down into valleys. Beneath these glaciers, the land was being transformed. As the ice pressed down, it carved deep valleys, ground down mountains into rounded hills, and scooped out the basins that would one day become Great Lakes. The Great Lakes of North America, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, are the legacy of the Ice Age, left behind when glaciers retreated and meltwater filled their vast depressions. In northern Europe, the fjords of Norway, those steep, dramatic valleys filled with ocean water, were carved by the relentless passage of ice. Even now, as we admire their beauty, we are looking directly into the frozen fingerprints of the Ice Age. And yet, not everywhere was frozen. Between the glaciers, vast grasslands stretched outward, cold, windy plains where grasses and shrubs clung stubbornly to the soil. These steppes were home to great herds of animals that grazed across the frozen ground. The woolly mammoth, The woolly rhinoceros, the musk ox, and countless others survive by foraging on hardy plants, their thick coats and layers of fat protecting them from the bitter chill. Predators followed, lean and powerful, shaped by the need to hunt in these icy conditions. Life, in all its resilience, adapted again and again to the rhythm of glaciation. And then, there was us. Humanity's story is deeply tied to the Ice Age. It was during this time that early humans, our ancestors, spread across Africa, into Europe, Asia, and eventually, to the Americas. They followed the herds, learned to survive in the cold, and built lives amid the glaciers. Imagine them gathered around fires, their breath rising into the night as sparks leaped upward into the dark. Their shelters were made of bone and hide, their tools carved from stone and wood. Yet, despite the harshness of the world around them, they endured. They painted images of the animals they hunted on the walls of caves, leaving behind stories that speak to us even now. Across tens of thousands of years, for hour upon hour, we could trace their paths, follow their migrations across frozen landscapes, and watch as they adapted to the shifting climates. When the ice advanced, they moved south, seeking warmth and food. When the ice retreated, they ventured north again, exploring new lands left behind by the melting glaciers. It was during the Ice Age that humans crossed from Siberia into North America, walking across the Bering Land Bridge, a vast stretch of land exposed when sea levels fell, connecting continents that today are separated by water. Without the Ice Age, human history itself might have taken an entirely different path. And as we think of these first people, let us drift slowly through their world. Hear the crunch of snow underfoot, the howl of wind across frozen plains. Picture the stars above them, the same stars we see tonight, guiding them across the land. Their world was harsh, but it was also filled with moments of quiet beauty. The shimmering glow of the aurora lit the skies above them, green and red curtains of light dancing across the heavens, a gift of the cold solar winds meeting Earth's magnetic field. The Ice Age was a time of contrast. It was cold, yes, but it was also alive. It was harsh, yet stunning. It was a world where survival required strength, but also cooperation, ingenuity, and adaptability. It shaped the animals we know, the landscapes we walk upon, and the very course of human destiny. So as you listen, as you drift deeper into rest, allow the Ice Age to unfold around you in your imagination. Feel the weight of time, slow and endless. As glaciers creep forward over centuries, see the long shadows cast by mammoths across the snow. Hear the distant cracking of ice as glaciers shift and groan. This is the story of Earth, a story written in frost and stone, a story that continues, quietly, even today. Now, let us wander further, deeper into this frozen world. Imagine the Earth not as we know it now, but as a living, breathing canvas of ice and cold. Step softly into this world, where time itself seems to move slower, and where the silence of snow stretches on forever. Let the journey carry you further, into calmness, as we explore what it was like during the Great Ice Age. As the Ice Age deepened, the planet seemed to breathe with the rhythm of cold and warmth. The glaciers were not fixed forever, but living, shifting giants. They advanced when the climate cooled, swallowing forests, rivers, and grasslands beneath their frozen weight. And then, as the world warmed again, they retreated, melting back toward the poles, releasing torrents of water that carved valleys and flooded basins. These slow pulses of ice and thaw marked the heartbeat of the Earth for millions of years. Each cycle lasted tens of thousands of years, a scale so vast that human lifetimes seemed like flickers against its expanse. Imagine standing at the edge of a glacier, perhaps in what is now Canada or Scandinavia. Before you lies a wall of ice, towering higher than a city building, stretching as far as the eye can see. Its surface is not smooth, but ridged and cracked, with deep crevasses yawning like the mouths of ancient caverns. The ice glows faintly blue, a shade so pure and cold that it almost feels otherworldly. From within, a deep groaning sound echoes the glacier shifting under its own unimaginable weight, inching forward slowly, but with power strong enough to grind entire mountains into dust. When the glaciers melted, they left behind rivers that roared with meltwater, rushing across the land in chaotic torrents. They carried boulders, silt, and sand, reshaping landscapes in their path. These rivers created fertile plains where, in warmer periods, plants would grow and animals would return. The Earth was constantly being sculpted, not in days or years, but across millennia. Valleys were etched, cliffs carved, lakes formed. The world we know today, with its rivers, coasts, rolling hills, and plains, is in many ways a gift from the Ice Age, and within this vast cycle, life endured. The tundras and steppes became home to unique ecosystems. Herds of reindeer and caribou traveled in great migrations, searching for lichen and grasses beneath the snow. Musk oxen clustered together against the cold, their shaggy coats layered with thick underwool that trapped heat. The woolly mammoth, with its long spiraled tusks, was perhaps the most iconic of all Ice Age creatures. These gentle giants lived in family groups, using their tusks to sweep snow aside and reveal the grasses beneath. They were creatures of patience and resilience, perfectly suited to this frozen world. Not far behind them followed the predators. The saber-toothed cat, with its muscular build and long curved canines, stalked the herds with quiet precision. The cave lion, larger than any modern lion, prowled in groups across the plains, roaring into the cold wind. The dire wolf, stocky and strong, hunted in packs, their sharp eyes gleaming in the pale moonlight. Even the short-faced bear, towering above most other animals, roamed these lands, feeding on what it could find. Yet, for all its dangers, the Ice Age was not only a story of predators and prey, it was also a story of balance, of delicate interdependence between animals, plants, and climate. Each creature played its part, shaping the ecosystem, and being shaped by it in return. The mammoths kept the grasslands open by trampling and grazing. The predators kept the herds moving, preventing overgrazing. The grasses stabilized the soil, holding the land against the winds that howled endlessly across the plains. Above this, worlds stretched skies filled with mystery. Nights in the Ice Age were long and dark, the stars shining brilliantly without the haze of pollution or the glow of human cities. The Milky Way stretched like a river of light across the heavens, and sometimes, when solar winds struck Earth's magnetic shield, the auroras appeared. Curtains of green, red, and purple light shimmered and danced, casting an eerie glow over the frozen land. For early humans, who gazed upward from their shelters, these lights must have seemed like the spirits of the sky, alive and watching. Let us linger with those early humans for a while, walking softly through their world. They were hunters and gatherers, moving with the seasons, following the migrations of animals. Their tools were simple but effective: flint blades, wooden spears, bone needles. They learned to sew warm clothing from hides and furs, wrapping themselves against the bitter chill. Fire was their constant companion, its glow keeping the darkness at bay, its warmth a fragile shield against the endless cold. Picture them gathered around a fire within a cave, the flames casting flickering light on the walls. On those walls, they painted bison, horses, mammoths, lions. These were not simple drawings, but vibrant images filled with motion and life, as if the animals themselves were moving across the stone. The caves of Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain preserve these paintings even today, silent echoes of Ice Age lives. For these people, art was not just decoration, it was connection to the animals they hunted, to the spirits of the land, and perhaps to one another. In their shelters, they spoke softly, sharing stories of the hunt, of ancestors, of the world around them. Language was evolving, slowly, like a river cutting its path through rock. With each word, they built stronger communities. With each story, they passed knowledge forward, ensuring the survival of their people. And survival was no easy feat. The cold was relentless. Winters stretched long and bitter, with temperatures plunging far below freezing. Food was not always plentiful, and people had to move often, seeking the resources they needed. Yet, time and again, they endured. Over thousands of years, they spread further across the continents, adapting to forests, rivers, mountains, and coastlines. The Ice Age, then, was not only a time of cold and struggle, it was also the stage upon which humanity grew. Our ancestors learned to adapt, to create, to share, and to dream. Without the Ice Age, we might not have become who we are today. As the cycles of glaciation continued, the Earth shifted again and again. Sometimes, the ice stretched farther, covering almost a third of the planet's surface. At other times, it retreated, allowing forests to regrow and animals to wander into new territories. These rhythms shaped migration, extinction, and evolution. Some species, like the mammoth and the saber-toothed cat, eventually vanished, unable to survive the warming climates at the end of the Ice Age. Others adapted, changing shape and behavior, becoming the animals we know today. Even the seas rose and fell with the ice. When glaciers locked away vast amounts of water, sea levels dropped, exposing new land. When the glaciers melted, the seas rose again, flooding coasts and reshaping continents. During the coldest phases, the oceans were hundreds of feet lower than they are today. Entire land bridges appeared, such as the one that once connected Asia to North America. These bridges allowed humans and animals alike to migrate, changing the course of history forever. And always, above it all, the world turned slowly, patiently, through the vast cycles of time. Glaciers advanced, glaciers retreated, animals lived and died, humans learned and grew. The Ice Age was not a single moment, but a grand symphony, composed over millions of years. A symphony of ice and fire, of stone and water, of survival and change. As you drift deeper into this story, let your thoughts wander like the rivers of meltwater flowing across frozen plains. Let the cold winds brush softly against your imagination as herds of mammoths pass in the distance. Hear the crack of ice, the call of a bird, the murmur of human voices by the fire. Allow the Ice Age to unfold in your mind, slow and gentle, guiding you into rest. For even in its chill, even in its challenges, the Ice Age was a time of quiet beauty, a time when the earth revealed its power and life revealed its resilience, a time that shaped the world we know and continues to whisper in the landscapes around us, in the lakes, the valleys, the mountains, and the seas. So let us keep walking, slowly, calmly, deeper into this frozen past. There is more to see, more to imagine, more to understand. The Ice Age stretches before us, vast and endless, like a dream waiting to be explored. The Ice Age was not just a single frozen blanket stretched across the world, but a patchwork of environments. Some regions lay buried beneath sheets of ice, thousands of feet thick. Others, where the glaciers did not reach, were open and dry, swept by cold winds and dotted with hardy grasses. There were tundras stretching endlessly, and beyond them, boreal forests of spruce, pine, and birch swaying in the chill air. Climates shifted slowly, yet constantly, like the turning of a vast wheel. If you wandered across Eurasia during those times, you might pass through landscapes both familiar and strange. In the far north, the ground was locked in permafrost, a frozen soil that held its chill even in the brief summers. Plants grew low to the ground, clinging to life in the thin layer of soil above the frost. In the warmer south, forests flourished, rich with deer, boar, and wild horses. Rivers wound through these forests, their waters cold and clear, feeding into great lakes that mirrored the pale sky. One of the most remarkable features of this age was the Mammoth Steppe. This was a vast, treeless plain, stretching from western Europe all the way across Siberia and into North America. It was one of the largest biomes the Earth has ever known, and it supported an extraordinary diversity of life. Grasses grew thick here, nourished by the rich soil left behind by glacial winds. These grasses in turn fed immense herds, mammoths, bison, horses, and rhinoceroses with shaggy coats. Predators roamed among them, always watching, always waiting. The air was cold, but dry, and the land seemed endless, stretching beneath. Skies that were wide and open. That as humans moved across this steppe, they must have felt both awe and humility. For days they could walk without seeing forests or mountains, only the horizon, broken by the silhouettes of animals grazing in the distance. The sound of the wind was constant, whispering across the grasses. When storms came, they rolled across the land with force, snow blowing sideways, stinging the skin. Yet in calmer times, the steppe was quiet, the silence broken only by the soft footfalls of herds and the occasional cry of a bird. It was in such environments that humans developed some of their deepest bonds with animals. They watched the herds closely, learning their habits, their migrations, their ways of survival. Over time, this knowledge became not only practical, but spiritual. The animals were seen as teachers, guides, and sometimes sacred beings. Evidence from cave paintings suggests a reverence that went beyond simple hunting. Perhaps in the glow of firelight, humans told stories of mammoths that carried the strength of the earth, or lions that guarded the boundaries of the wild. Beyond Eurasia, the Ice Age world was equally rich. In North America, giant creatures wandered the plains and forests. There were mastodons, relatives of the mammoth, with straighter tusks and heavy bodies. There were giant ground sloths, lumbering slowly as they reached into trees with powerful claws. Armadillo-like glyptodons, encased in heavy shells, grazed along riverbanks, and towering above them all, the mammoth roamed here as well, its long hair swaying as it moved across the open land. In South America, life took on different forms. There were saber-toothed cats, of course, but also creatures unique to that continent, massive terror birds with sharp beaks, and camel-like animals adapted to the plains. The Ice Age did not freeze the entire world into uniformity. Instead, it created a tapestry of environments, each with its own rhythms and creatures. Even the oceans were alive with change. Lower sea levels exposed vast stretches of coastline, creating land bridges that connected continents. In these times, early humans and animals crossed into new worlds. One such bridge, known as Beringia, stretched between Siberia and Alaska. It was not merely a narrow passage, but a wide expanse of land, dotted with grasses and shrubs, where mammoths, bison, and people could live. Across this bridge, humanity spread into the Americas, carrying with them tools, fire, and the stories of their ancestors. Life on the coasts was different still. Where glaciers had retreated, rivers poured into the seas, carrying nutrients that nourished marine life. Seals and walruses gathered on the ice, while whales swam through frigid waters, their breath rising in plumes of mist. Birds wheeled above the waves, their calls sharp in the cold air. For humans who reached these coasts, the sea was both a barrier and a source of life. Fish, shellfish, and seabirds provided food when the land seemed barren. The rhythm of the tides, constant and eternal, offered a new way of living in harmony with nature. Through all of this, the earth itself was shifting. The weight of the glaciers pressed down on the land, sinking it slowly into the crust. When the ice melted, the land rebounded upward, rising again as if breathing out after a long, heavy sigh. Volcanoes erupted, their fire contrasting against the ice, pouring ash into the skies and reshaping the climate. Earthquakes rippled through regions burdened by the shifting weight. The planet was alive, dynamic, restless, and in this restless world, humanity was learning. We were not yet farmers, not yet builders of great cities, but we were creators nonetheless. We carved bone flutes, the oldest instruments known, and their haunting notes must have echoed across valleys and plains. We strung beads of shells and stones, perhaps for beauty, perhaps for meaning. We buried our dead with care, sometimes with flowers or with tools, as if to send them on a journey beyond this life. These small gestures remind us that, even in the harshness of the Ice Age, love and imagination endured. As centuries passed, humans became skilled travelers. They followed rivers, crossed mountains, and walked along coastlines. They adapted to new challenges, from icy winds to burning sun, from tundra to desert. With each migration, they carried fragments of knowledge: how to make fire, how to shape tools, how to find food. Slowly, these fragments accumulated, weaving a tapestry of wisdom that connected generations. But the Ice Age was never still. The climate shifted once more. At times, the earth warmed, and glaciers began to retreat. Forests spread northward, covering lands that had once been bare. Animals moved with them, changing their ranges. Some species flourished, while others disappeared forever. The warming brought new opportunities, but also new challenges. Where glaciers had stood, great lakes formed. Where dry land had been, seas now flooded in. Humanity, once again, had to adapt. Imagine the feeling of standing on the edge of a retreating glacier. Streams of meltwater rush past your feet, carrying fragments of rock and ice. In the distance, the ice groans, breaking and collapsing, echoing like thunder. The air is damp, filled with mist. Before your eyes, a new valley is being born, a place where, in time, forests will grow, rivers will flow, and animals will wander. To witness this transformation must have been to see the earth itself awaken. And yet, even as warmth spread, the memory of the cold lingered. The animals of the Ice Age carried within them the marks of survival: thick fur, strong bodies, behaviors shaped by centuries of chill. The humans carried it too, in their stories, their tools, and their resilience. The Ice Age had been their teacher, and its lessons would echo long after the ice itself was gone. When we look back now, across tens of thousands of years, we see the Ice Age not as a single block of frozen time, but as a living cycle, cold and warmth, advance and retreat, life and extinction, creation and adaptation, a rhythm as deep as the heartbeat of the earth itself. So let us pause here, in this place between cold and warmth, between past and present. Let the slow winds of the Ice Age drift around you, soft and steady. Picture the herds moving across, the plains, the stars glittering in the night sky, the fire crackling in a cave as people gather close. In this world, there is no hurry. Time itself moves gently, like the glaciers, reshaping the land not in moments, but in ages. Allow yourself to walk deeper still, into this frozen dream. The Ice Age continues to unfold, a story written in ice and stone, in fire and breath, in silence and song, a story that, even now, lingers within us all. As the Ice Age unfolded, its rhythms were not always uniform. Sometimes the glaciers advanced, pressing southward with a slow and steady force, reshaping valleys and grinding mountains into dust. At other times, they retreated, melting back toward the poles, leaving behind fresh landscapes. These cycles of advance and retreat were not sudden storms but long, measured breaths of the earth, lasting thousands of years each. To live within such cycles required patience. For humans, life was not about rushing forward, but about listening, observing, and adapting. Each generation grew up in a world both familiar and subtly changed. Rivers shifted their courses, hills emerged where once there had been ice, forests expanded into open plains, and then, over centuries, withdrew again as the cold returned. The people learned to follow the earth's quiet rhythms, moving when they must, staying when they could. The night sky was perhaps their most constant companion. Free from the glow of cities or machines, the stars would have been brilliant, sharp, and unending. Imagine lying on your back beside a campfire, the air crisp, the ground beneath you hard and cool. Above, countless stars spill across the heavens, their light shimmering as if the universe itself is breathing. For Ice Age people, the stars must have been more than decoration. They were guides, storytellers, reminders of patterns that stretched far beyond the human span of life. Under these stars, stories took shape. Around fires, people likely spoke of the great animals they hunted, not only in terms of survival, but in ways that wove meaning into their existence. A mammoth might not have been just a source of meat and bone, but a being with spirit, strength, and memory. A lion might not have been merely a predator, but a guardian of the boundary between wilderness and safety. The stories, spoken softly, in the flickering glow of flames, would have echoed into the night, comforting and connecting. The caves of Europe still preserve some of these stories. Painted deep in the earth, hidden from the elements, images of animals seem to move across stone walls. Horses gallop, mammoths stride, bison stand strong, their forms outlined with charcoal and ochre. The people who made these paintings chose not to depict themselves often, but rather the creatures that shared their world. It was as if they sought to honor the life around them, to make permanent the fleeting moments of the hunt. The migration, the sight of animals silhouetted against the horizon. Step into such a cave, and you would find more than paintings. The silence inside is deep, broken only by the soft drip of water from above. The air is cool and still, holding the scent of earth. A torch flickers, and the painted animals seem to move, their forms dancing with the shadows. Perhaps music was played here as well, soft notes from bone flutes echoing against the stone. In this setting, the art would not have been mere decoration, but an experience, a bridge between humans and the wider world of the Ice Age. Beyond the caves, life was full of movement. Herds migrated with the seasons, following grasses and water. Humans too were travelers. They built shelters of mammoth bones and hides, or simple huts of wood and stone. They carried what they needed, tools fashioned from flint, fire carefully preserved. Each step across the frozen ground was part of a longer journey, one that stretched across continents and generations. On the vast mammoth steppe, life was abundant, yet fragile. The grasses could support immense herds, but the balance was delicate. A hard winter, a late thaw, or a sudden storm could change everything. For predators, wolves, cave, lions, and humans alike, survival depended on watching closely, on knowing when to wait and when to act. Every movement, every decision, was guided by the slow rhythm of the seasons. Even in the coldest places, life found a way. Beneath frozen lakes, fish swam slowly through dark waters. Along rocky cliffs, birds nested, their cries sharp in the thin air. In hidden burrows, small mammals slept through the winter, waking when the world warmed. Each creature carried within it a strategy, a way of being that had been shaped by countless generations. Together, they created a world that was both harsh and alive, quiet yet filled with subtle beauty. Imagine walking across such a landscape. The snow crunches softly beneath your feet. In the distance, a herd of reindeer moves slowly, their breath rising in faint clouds. A wolf's howl drifts across the plain, low and mournful, fading into silence. The air is so clear that every sound carries, and yet the stillness is vast. Each step feels both grounding and dreamlike, as if the earth itself is listening. Over time, the Ice Age sculpted not only the land, but also the human spirit. To live in such conditions required resilience, but also cooperation. People shared food, tended fires, cared for one another in the long nights. Without these bonds, survival would have been nearly impossible. The cold was not an enemy to be conquered, but a reality to be endured together. This spirit of connection, born in the Ice Age, still echoes in humanity today. And yet, the earth was always shifting. Sometimes the climate warmed, and forests spread northward, filling the land with green. The air grew softer, and animals like deer and boar thrived. Humans adapted once more, learning to hunt in forests, to move more quietly, to find new foods. Then, as if exhaling, the earth would cool again, and the forests would withdraw. The land returned to steppe and tundra, and the great herds once more became the center of life. These cycles, known as glacials and interglacials, were the heartbeat of the Ice Age. To us, they may seem immense spans of time, but to those who lived through them, they were gradual, almost imperceptible shifts. A child might grow old without noticing the change, yet across generations, the world transformed. In this way, humanity was shaped not by sudden revolutions, but by slow, steady rhythms. As patient as the turning of the stars, it is soothing to imagine how these rhythms felt in daily life. Waking each morning to the glow of dawn on snow, watching the smoke of a fire rise into the still air, listening to the distant rumble of a glacier, or the soft murmur of a stream freed from ice in spring. These sounds and sights became part of the fabric of life, comforting in their constancy. Even as the larger world shifted in ways too slow to see. As millennia passed, humans spread farther still. Some followed the herds into new lands. Others turned to the coasts, learning to gather food from the sea. With each step, they carried fragments of the Ice Age within them, the skills of survival, the stories of animals, the memory of stars above frozen plains. Even as the glaciers retreated, the legacy of the cold remained. Woven into the human journey, that and always, the earth continued its dance. Ice advanced, then withdrew. Seas fell, then rose. Forests spread, then faded. Each change was slow, gentle, and vast, reminding us that we are part of a world much larger than ourselves. The Ice Age was not a pause in time, but a movement, a song played softly over tens of thousands of years. To listen to it now is to hear the deep music of the earth itself. As the glaciers breathed across the continents, life within their reach unfolded like a slow dream. The great sheets of ice stretched outward, their surfaces gleaming beneath pale sunlight, their edges grinding over stone with a patience that defies imagination. To stand near such a glacier would have been to feel the presence of something immense, not violent, but steady, like time itself made visible. The air around the ice would have been cool and hushed, carrying the faint crack of shifting layers, and the distant trickle of meltwater finding its way into the earth. This water, born of ancient snow, carved valleys and shaped rivers that still flow today. Each drop carried with it the memory of mountains worn down, of rocks smoothed into pebbles, of landscapes rearranged. Over centuries, rivers braided themselves across plains, leaving fertile soil in their wake. Long after the ice had withdrawn, humans would settle in these valleys, unaware that their fields and meadows had been gifts of the glaciers. The animals of the Ice Age lived within this shifting world, their movements and lives guided by its slow rhythm. The woolly mammoth, with its thick coat and curving tusks, walked in herds across the steppe. These herds moved not with haste, but with the patience of creatures that had learned the land's cycles over generations. Their footsteps pressed softly into frozen ground, their presence vast yet gentle. Where mammoths passed, the land bore their imprint, trails worn into the grass that others followed. Alongside them moved the steppe bison, strong and enduring, their curved horns glinting in the winter sun. They gathered in large numbers, their bodies huddled close for warmth, their breath rising in unison. Predators watched them with keen eyes. Cave lions crouched in the distance, wolves circling with quiet persistence. Each encounter was a dance, not of cruelty, but of balance, where life gave itself to life. And the rhythm of the Ice Age continued. Farther north, in the tundra, reindeer migrated in endless lines. They followed the growth of lichen across the frozen soil, their hooves clicking softly against stone. For humans, these herds were vital, providing food, hides, and bones for tools. To follow them was to live, to walk as they walked, across plains where the wind whispered through grasses and the horizon stretched unbroken. Birds too were part of this world. Each year, as the seasons shifted, they traced long journeys across the sky, their calls echoing faintly in the crisp air. Their wings carried them between the frozen north and warmer lands, stitching together distant places with invisible threads of flight. To the people of the Ice Age, their return each spring must have been a promise, a reminder that even in the coldest times, renewal was certain. Life in this era was not only about survival, but about connection. The people observed the world around them with care, noticing details that modern eyes might overlook. The shape of clouds, the direction of the wind, the sound of cracking ice, all were signs to be read, gentle messages from the earth. To live in the Ice Age was to live in conversation with nature, where every whisper of the landscape carried meaning. At night, these people gathered close to firelight, the flames casting soft shadows against stone or snow. They shared warmth, food, and stories. The fire's glow was more than comfort. It was a circle of light against the vastness of the cold, a small sun that bound them together. In that glow, voices rose and fell in rhythm, carrying tales of hunts, of animals, of ancestors who had walked before them. These stories were not written, yet they endured, passed gently from one generation to the next, carried like embers across time. Sometimes, their stories took form on stone walls. In caves, deep beneath the earth, paintings were made with patient hands. A brush of charcoal traced the outline of a bison. A curve of ochre shaped a horse in motion. The animals depicted seem alive, their bodies caught mid-step, their strength preserved across thousands of years. Standing before these images, one feels not only the artistry, but the quiet devotion behind them. They were offerings, perhaps, or prayers, or simply reflections of the beauty these people saw each day. Whatever their purpose, they remain as echoes of Ice Age voices, soft yet enduring. The caves also held sound. Flutes carved from bird bones have been found, their hollow shapes tuned to produce gentle melodies. Imagine the sound of such a flute in the cool silence of a cavern, soft notes rising and falling, mingling with the drip of water and the crackle of fire. Music would have floated through the air like breath, calming, uniting, reminding all who listened that life carried harmony even in the coldest times. Beyond the caves, the world stretched in quiet vastness. Forests of pine and birch stood tall in places where warmth allowed. Their branches whispered with wind, their needles capturing the soft glow of sunlight. Beneath them, small animals scurried, leaving tracks in snow. The scent of resin and earth filled the air, grounding those who walked among the trees. For humans, the forest was both shelter and challenge, a place of resources and mystery. The seas, too, were part of the Ice Age story. With so much water locked in ice, sea levels were lower, and coastlines stretched far beyond their present bounds. Land bridges connected continents, allowing humans and animals to move between them. Across these paths, people journeyed into new worlds, carrying with them fire, tools, and stories. The ocean itself was colder, its waves slower, but it remained a source of life, offering fish, seals, and birds to those who learned to gather from its depths. The beauty of the Ice Age was found in its contrasts. There was cold, but also fire. There was silence, but also song. There was vastness, but also the intimacy of small groups gathered close. The balance of these contrasts gave shape to existence, weaving a world both fragile and strong. To imagine walking through this world is to imagine moving slowly, each step steady, each breath visible in the frosty air. The horizon might stretch endlessly, yet the details nearby, a branch heavy with frost, a track pressed into snow, a stone warmed by fire, were enough to hold attention. Time itself seemed slower, stretched out across days and seasons, unhurried, like the measured flow of ice across the land. And so, humanity continued, not rushing forward, but following the Earth's gentle rhythm. The Ice Age lasted for tens of thousands of years, and in that span, countless lives were lived, each one quiet and significant. Together, they formed a tapestry of endurance, of patience, of quiet wonder in the face of the cold. In this way, the Ice Age was not only an era of survival, but an era of learning. It taught humans to listen, to adapt, to find beauty even in difficulty. The lessons of the Ice Age remain with us, carried in memory, in story, in the very shape of the land. To remember this time is to remember a world both harsh and gentle, both fleeting and eternal. And as the night deepens, the thought of that world becomes a kind of lullaby, the sound of snow falling softly on earth, the glow of fire against darkness, the endless stars turning slowly above. The Ice Age, distant yet near, becomes a story not of fear, but of peace, a reminder that even in the coldest times, warmth endures. As the Ice Age carried on, the rhythms of the seasons remained both familiar and immense. Winters were long, often stretching for months in deep silence, while summers were brief and gentle, a momentary loosening of the land's icy hold. When the warmth arrived, flowers bloomed quickly, painting meadows with colors that stood in soft contrast to the muted whites and grays of the snow. These blossoms did not linger, but while they lasted, they fed bees, butterflies, and herds of grazing animals. To watch the meadows awaken was to see life return in a quiet burst, fleeting yet full. The tundra in summer held a beauty that was subtle but undeniable. Small streams cut their way through thawing ground, carrying glimmers of sky across the soil. Mosses and lichens softened the earth, their textures gentle beneath the hand. Migrating birds filled the air with sound, their calls rising in clear, simple notes that echoed across the open horizon. Each sound carried far, as though the landscape itself wanted to hold on to every vibration, every reminder of life. For the people of the Ice Age, summer meant opportunity. The warmth opened paths, made hunting easier, and provided plants and fruits that could be gathered. Families moved with the season, setting camps near rivers, lakes, or open plains. Fires burned not to hold back the deadly cold, but to cook, and to gather around in the cool evening light. The smoke from those fires would have drifted upward, blending with the soft colors of twilight. Hunting was a communal effort, never rushed, always measured. Spears tipped with stone or bone were shaped carefully, their edges sharp enough to pierce the thick hides of great animals. Yet every hunt was done with caution, with respect, for the hunters knew the balance of life could be broken if they took too much. When an animal fell, none of it was wasted. Meat was dried or cooked, hides became clothing and shelter, bones became tools. Even sinew found purpose, strung into bows or bindings. Each gift of the hunt carried the promise of survival. Through another stretch of cold. In caves and shelters, people stored food, carefully wrapped or hidden beneath stones, where the cool air preserved it. These stores were more than supplies. They were assurance, a quiet promise that tomorrow would not be empty. When storms raged, or when snow closed the land, these stores meant families could sit together in calm, listening to the wind without fear. The children of this time grew up surrounded by such lessons. They learned the tracks of animals by watching the snow, their eyes following lines pressed gently into the earth. They learned the patterns of stars by listening to elders point out constellations against the night sky. They learned the stories of their people, the songs that carried memory, the knowledge of tools and fire. Childhood was not separate from survival, but woven into it. Yet it was also filled with laughter, with the joy of running across open plains, of throwing stones into streams, of chasing birds as they rose into flight. At night, when all else grew still, the world above them unfolded in brilliance. Without modern lights to dim the sky, the stars appeared in their full expanse. Constellations stretched clearly from horizon to horizon, their shapes familiar to those who studied them. The Milky Way cut across the darkness, a river of light that seemed to mirror the frozen rivers on Earth. In winter, the aurora borealis shimmered, weaving green and purple curtains of light that danced across the heavens. To watch such a display in the silence of the Ice Age must have been an experience both humbling and soothing. a reminder that even in the darkest cold, beauty surrounded them. And so life carried on, slow but steady. The animals moved across their ranges, the people followed them, the seasons turned with a rhythm that never faltered. Across thousands of years, this cycle endured, shaping not just the land but the very identity of those who lived within it. They became people of endurance, people of patience, people attuned to the smallest signs of change. The Ice Age was not one unbroken stretch of cold, but rather a series of pulses. Warmer periods eased the grip of ice, allowing forests to spread, rivers to swell, and grasslands to flourish. Then, as the world shifted again, the cold returned, and the glaciers advanced. These cycles of advance and retreat gave the land its shape, carving valleys, leaving behind ridges, moving stones that still lie scattered across fields today. To the people, these shifts must have seemed like slow breaths of the earth itself. They adapted as the land changed, moving when rivers changed course, learning new hunting grounds when animals shifted their paths. They were not separate from the earth but part of its rhythm, moving in step with changes that would seem vast and unstoppable to modern eyes. Their resilience was quiet. There were no monuments, no great structures to declare their presence. Instead, their legacy rests in the small things they left behind: a painting deep in a cave, a flute carved from bone, a stone tool shaped with precision. These artifacts are whispers across time, gentle echoes of lives once lived with care and patience. If one could step into that world now, it would feel at once familiar and distant. The crunch of snow underfoot, the breath visible in cold air, the warmth of a fire, these sensations remain the same. Yet the horizon would be filled with animals no longer here, the air carrying scents and sounds now lost. It would be a quieter world, yet also fuller in its own way, with every detail carrying meaning for those who knew how to listen. In remembering the Ice Age, we are reminded not of hardship alone, but of the beauty that thrived within it. It was a time when survival was balanced with wonder, when every meal, every fire, every star seen overhead carried significance. It was a world of slowness, of presence, of being deeply connected to the land, and in that connection lies the lesson that even in the coldest of times, warmth is found not only in fire, but in the bonds between people, in the stories shared, in the rhythms of life carried forward. The Ice Age was a time of vast contrasts. There were moments when the land seemed locked in stillness, bound in frost and silence. Yet there were also times when warmth slipped through, loosening the frozen grip and letting life surge forward. This balance gave the world a gentle pulse, like the slow heartbeat of the planet itself, carrying life through endless cycles of cold and thaw. When the glaciers advanced, they carried with them unimaginable weight. Their icy bodies pressed against mountains, carving valleys that would later fill with rivers and forests. Rocks, carried within the ice, scraped against the land, leaving long marks that can still be traced today. Each advance reshaped the face of the earth, sculpting hills, deep lakes, and ridges. When the ice receded, it left behind new landscapes, fresh ground that slowly grew green as moss and grass returned. To the people who lived then, these changes unfolded slowly, almost beyond notice. A child born when the ice stood far to the north might grow old without ever realizing it had crept closer. Yet over generations, the difference became clear. Hunting grounds shifted, rivers changed their course, valleys filled with water, and once familiar paths vanished under advancing snow. Families moved when they had to, carrying with them not only tools and fire, but also stories of the land as it once was, and as it might be again. Animals, too, adapted to this rhythm. The woolly mammoth was perhaps the most iconic, a towering creature with curved tusks and thick fur, able to thrive in bitter cold. They roamed in herds, their footprints pressing deep into the snow, their calls echoing across the plains. Alongside them moved the woolly rhinoceros, broad and heavy, grazing on tough grasses. Herds of bison gathered in numbers so great that the ground shook as they passed. And above all, soared birds, migrating with the seasons, carrying the sky upon their wings. Predators followed these herds, sleek and powerful. The cave lion, larger than the lions of today, stalked silently across the plains. Packs of wolves worked together with patience, their movements almost like shadows in the snow. The saber-toothed cat, with its long curved fangs, hunted with bursts of sudden strength. Each predator had its place, each relied on the herds, and each, in turn, played a role in shaping the balance of life. The people of the Ice Age lived within this balance, never above it. They walked carefully, observing, listening, knowing that every choice carried consequence. They studied the tracks of animals pressed into snow or mud, reading the direction of herds, the freshness of trails, the signs of danger. They learned the voices of birds, the calls that warned of predators, the songs that marked changing seasons. The world was a vast book, and they learned to read it without letters. Through patience and presence in their shelters, they shared this knowledge with the young. Stories were not only entertainment but instruction, woven with lessons of survival. Around fires, elders spoke of hunts long past, of winters survived, of stars that guided journeys. They taught not by command but by rhythm, repeating words until they became part of memory. These stories carried more than knowledge. They carried identity, reminding each generation that they belonged to a long line of people who had faced the cold and endured. Art was another way these people remembered. In deep caves, away from wind and light, they painted scenes of animals, using red ochre, charcoal, and minerals ground into powder. Horses ran across the walls, bison stood in still strength, mammoths loomed in powerful outlines. These images were not casual decoration but sacred memory, capturing the essence of the world around them. To stand in those caves, torchlight flickering across the walls, must have been to step into a living dream, where the boundaries between life and image blurred. The making of such art required patience. Pigments had to be gathered, mixed with fat or water, applied with brushes of fur, or with the breath blown through hollow bones. Each stroke carried intention, each line a record of something deeply seen. These paintings endure even now, thousands upon thousands of years later, whispers of beauty preserved in darkness. Music, too, belonged to that world. Flutes carved from bird bones, their holes carefully placed, allowed breath to become song. The notes would have echoed in caves, soft and haunting, filling the air with tones both human and otherworldly. Rhythms might have been kept with stones, with sticks against hollow logs, with hands against stretched hide. These sounds carried into the night, into the stillness, offering comfort, connection, and joy. In such moments, gathered round a fire, with stars overhead, or walls painted with living shapes, the people of the Ice Age found warmth that was not only physical, but spiritual. The land itself, though harsh, was never silent. In winter, the wind carried long voices, rising and falling across empty plains. The crack of ice splitting on frozen rivers echoed like distant drums. In spring, the thaw brought rushing water, streams swelling into rivers, carrying stones and branches with them. Birds returned in sudden numbers, their calls rising together in a chorus of life. Each season had its sound, its music, its presence. The people moved with these seasons, their lives woven into the larger rhythm. They did not fight the world around them, but flowed within it, adapting, listening, enduring. It was this patience, this attunement, that allowed them to thrive where others might falter. At night, when fires burned low, and sleep drew near, dreams were likely filled with the images of this world, herds moving like waves across the plains, stars shifting across the sky, the slow but steady breath of the earth itself. In those dreams, perhaps they felt themselves not separate from the world, but part of its deep, unending flow. And so the Ice Age was not simply a time of cold, but a time of presence, a time of balance between hardship and beauty, between silence and song. It was a world that shaped those who lived within it, teaching them resilience, patience, and a quiet reverence for life. The Ice Age stretched on for thousands upon thousands of years, and within its slow passage, entire generations lived and passed. To those who walked its landscapes, time was not measured in centuries, but in seasons, in winters endured, in springs welcomed, in the steady rhythm of birth and growth and return. What seemed frozen to us now was to them a living cycle, each change marking the flow of their lives. As winters deepened, the nights grew long and heavy, the stars brighter than we can ever see in our cities today. The sky seemed endless, filled with constellations that drifted slowly across the heavens. These stars became guides and companions, steady points in a shifting world. People looked up at them with wonder, perhaps weaving them into stories, finding shapes in their patterns, and marking the passage of time as they rose and fell with the seasons. The moon, too, would have cast its glow across frozen fields, silvering the snow, painting shadows across icy lakes. To step out under that cold light, hearing only the distant cry of a wolf or the crunch of snow underfoot, must have felt like stepping into a dream. The silence was immense, and yet within it there was comfort, the kind of silence that holds rather than empties. Within their shelters, families huddled together, warmth shared not only by fire but by closeness. The smell of smoke lingered in their clothes and hair, a reminder of survival, of fire's steady gift. Bones and antlers collected from hunts became tools and ornaments. Skins were softened and sewn into clothing that could shield against the bitterest cold. Each object carried labor, memory, and skill, handed down from hand to hand, generation to generation. The children grew within this world of rhythm and ritual, learning to weave cords, to sharpen stone, to follow the signs of animals across the snow. Their games mirrored the skills they would one day need, their laughter ringing out even in the coldest air. Joy was not absent from the Ice Age. It was found in the crackling of fire, in the first warmth of spring, in the sight of a successful hunt returning to camp. When spring arrived, the world awakened with sudden life. Ice melted, waters swelled, and green spread across the land in tender shoots. Animals that had hidden through the winter emerged again, lean but alive. The herds moved northward, chasing fresh grass, and the people followed, their lives tethered to the movements of the animals. The air filled with birdsong, with buzzing insects, with the sound of flowing water. After months of quiet, the world seemed to hum with energy. Flowers dotted the ground, brief flashes of color against the grass. Trees stretched new leaves, their canopies thickening, providing shelter and shade. Streams, newly freed from ice, gurgled with clear cold water. To drink from such a stream, to feel its freshness against the skin, must have been one of life's simplest and purest joys. Summer brought abundance, though it was always fleeting. Berries ripened, fish filled the rivers, game grew strong and plentiful. The warmth allowed longer journeys, gatherings of families, moments of rest beside rivers or beneath the stars. Fires burned, not only for warmth, but for cooking, for ceremony, for the simple joy of watching flame against night. Yet always in the distance, the glaciers stood, vast and immovable, reminders that winter would return. Their white bodies gleamed in sunlight, cold against the horizon, immense and eternal. Their slow advance and retreat was beyond the scale of human lives, yet their presence was always felt, shaping the land and the rhythm of the world. The Ice Age was not uniform across the earth. While great sheets of ice covered much of the north, other lands remained free, though colder than they are now. In some regions, open plains stretched for miles, filled with grasses and scattered forests. In others, rugged mountains rose, their peaks capped with snow, their valleys filled with life. Deserts existed too, where winds carried sand instead of snow, where survival meant a different kind of endurance. Across these varied lands, people adapted uniquely, finding ways to live with what they had. Some dwelled in caves, their walls painted with visions of animals. Others built shelters from mammoth bones, their curved ribs forming arches that could be covered with hides. Some carried their homes with them, light and temporary, moving with the seasons. Everywhere, people wove their lives into the fabric of the earth, not separate but deeply connected. To imagine walking through such a world is to slow the pace of thought. The horizon stretches endlessly, broken only by the slow movement of animals or the rise of distant hills. Each step crunches in snow, or presses into soft earth, or splashes through shallow streams. The air is sharp, carrying scents of pine, of smoke, of wet earth after thaw. Around you, the world is immense, yet intimate, filled with details that reveal themselves only to those who look with patience. Firelight in the night would have been a beacon, its glow visible across the plain, a sign of safety and warmth. Within its circle, stories unfolded, laughter mingled with the crackle of wood, songs rose softly into the air. Beyond its light lay darkness, not frightening but vast, filled with the unknown, with silence, with the steady rhythm of the world at rest. Dreams carried people further still. In sleep, perhaps they saw herds moving endlessly, rivers flowing without end, stars falling into mountains, or ancestors walking beside them. Dreams blurred the line between the living and the unseen, carrying wisdom, comfort, or warning. In the morning, they might share these dreams, weaving them into their understanding of life. The Ice Age was not only a physical time, but a spiritual one, where every part of the world carried meaning. Stones, rivers, animals, stars, all held voices. All were part of the great web of being. To live in such awareness was to walk with reverence, to step carefully, to see life as a circle rather than a line. Even now, when we look back, we can feel some of that presence. The glaciers may have melted, but their marks remain. The valleys carved by ice still hold rivers. The moraines left behind still rise as ridges. The paintings on cave walls still speak across thousands of years. The very bones of mammoths, lifted from frozen ground, still carry the weight of that time. And though the Ice Age ended, though warmth returned and the earth shifted once more, its memory lingers, not only in stone and bone but in us. For we are the descendants of those who walked through that world, who learned patience from its winters, who found beauty in its silence, who endured its trials and sang within its night. Their strength flows in us, quiet and unseen, a gift from the deep past that still shapes who we are. And so, when we close our eyes, when we breathe slowly, when we listen to the silence between sounds, we can almost return. We can almost hear the mammoth's call echoing across frozen plains, feel the fire's warmth against our skin, see the stars glittering in a sky untouched by city lights. We can remember, not with our minds alone, but with something deeper, something that carries across time. The Ice Age lives within us still, not as cold, not as hardship, but as presence, as memory, as the quiet song of the earth itself. The Ice Age was a time of contrasts. For all the silence of frozen nights, there was also the thundering movement of life. Across the plains, great herds stirred the ground beneath them, their hooves pounding like distant drums. Mammoths, woolly and immense, moved with deliberate grace, their long tusks curving toward the sky. Beside them walked bison, thick-coated and strong, pressing forward in tightly knit groups. Reindeer traveled in flowing streams, their antlers rising like branches against the horizon. To see such gatherings was to be reminded of the immensity of life, of the pulse that continued even in the coldest times. The land, though harsh, was never empty. Every valley, every riverbank, every stretch of tundra carried movement, sound, and being. The air trembled with it, filled with the sense of animals, the calls of birds, the rustle of wind through grasses. Predators followed, silent and patient. Lions, larger than those we know today, stalked the herds. Wolves moved together in packs, their keen eyes watching for weakness. Saber-toothed cats crouched in shadow, their great fangs gleaming in the pale light. These hunters shaped the movements of the herds, pressing them forward, reminding them that survival was always a dance between caution and hunger. And people, too, walked within this dance. They were not separate, but part of the same rhythm. Their lives depended on the herds, on the fish in the rivers, on the plants that grew in brief summers. They watched with patience, learning the patterns of the animals, the timing of migrations, the signs that marked when to follow and when to wait. With skill and persistence, they hunted, honoring the life they took, ensuring that nothing was wasted. Every part of an animal was used. Meat was roasted or dried, skins turned into clothing and shelter, bones shaped into tools, sinew twisted into cord. Even the smallest piece carried purpose, nothing discarded, everything belonging. In this way, life continued in circles, each being nourishing another, the earth itself sustaining all. At times, the people painted what they saw. In the flickering firelight of caves, they traced the curves of mammoths, the leap of deer, the hunt of lions. Their hands, covered in ochre or charcoal, pressed against stone, leaving outlines of palms, whispers across time. These paintings were not only images but memory, ceremony, perhaps prayer. They were a way to honor what was seen, to keep it alive beyond the moment, to weave it into the story of the people. Imagine standing in such a cave, the air cool and still, the firelight dancing against the walls. The shapes of animals move, with the flame, shifting as though alive, as though walking once more across the stone. The sound of breathing fills the space, steady and soft, echoing slightly. It feels as though the cave itself listens, as though it holds the voices of all who ever stood there. Beyond the caves, the world stretched vast and unbounded. Plains opened endlessly, skies arched high and clear, rivers wound like silver threads. Across the earth, to walk through such spaces was to feel small yet connected, to know that every step carried you deeper into the mystery of the world. The weather shifted slowly, yet its changes shaped everything. Winters grew long, summers short. Glaciers expanded, pressing outward, reshaping the land. Then, with time, they retreated, leaving valleys carved deep, lakes formed from their meltwater, soils rich with groundstone. Each cycle altered the earth, building the landscapes we know today. Mountains rose above it all, their peaks sharp and white, their slopes covered in dark forests. In sheltered valleys, animals grazed, streams trickled, and plants grew thick. The contrast between the high, cold and the sheltered warmth created pockets of life, refuges where species survived even when the world outside grew harsher. These refuges became seeds for the future, places from which forests and animals spread when the ice withdrew. The seas too were different then. So much water was locked in ice that sea levels dropped, exposing vast stretches of land that now lie beneath the ocean. Bridges of earth connected continents, allowing animals and people to wander farther than ever before. Across one such bridge, humans crossed into the Americas, stepping into lands untouched by their kind, carrying with them fire, tools, and memory. In these new lands, they found creatures unlike any they had seen before. Giant sloths moved slowly through forests, towering over men. Armored glyptodonts, massive and domed, trundled across the plains. Horses, camels, and elephants roamed freely, shaping the grasslands with their grazing. It was a world rich and full, yet fragile, balanced delicately between abundance and loss. The people adapted with each step, learning new ways, finding new foods, crafting new stories. Wherever they went, they carried the essence of the Ice Age with them. Patience, endurance, reverence. They lit fires in new lands, sang beneath unfamiliar stars, and found home even in the most distant places. The stars themselves were constant, shining above glaciers and forests alike. Night after night, they looked down upon the earth, steady and calm. For the people of the Ice Age, the sky was a map, a clock, a storybook. Constellations guided them through the seasons, marked the time for journeys, and carried the voices of ancestors. To look up was to see both eternity and memory, to feel that life stretched far beyond the moment, and always, the rhythm of seasons continued. Winter, with its silence and endurance. Spring, with its awakening and hope. Summer, brief and abundant, filled with song and warmth. Autumn, a time of preparation, of gathering, of watching the herds move once more. Year after year, the cycle repeated, and within it, life endured. The Ice Age was not a frozen prison, but a breathing, living time. It was vast, yet intimate, harsh, yet full of beauty. To live within it was to live close to the earth, to feel its pulse in every breath, to know its silence as deeply as its sound. And though it lies far behind us now, though its glaciers have melted and its creatures have passed, the essence remains. It lingers in the landscapes carved by ice, in the bones uncovered from frozen ground, in the stories painted on stone. It lingers within us, in the resilience of our bodies, in the patience of our spirits, in the quiet wonder we feel when we gaze at the night sky. The Ice Age was not only a chapter of history, but a teacher, showing us how to endure, how to honor, how to see beauty even in the coldest silence. To listen to its story is to hear the whisper of the earth itself, a whisper that says, life continues, always, in circles, in cycles, in endless flow. The Ice Age world was never still for long. Even as the ice pressed outward, reshaping the land, the living earth adjusted in countless small ways. Trees bent in the winds, their trunks leaning against the endless push of cold air. Grasses spread across open plains, weaving carpets of green and gold that rippled in the breeze. Flowers appeared in the briefest summers, their blooms small yet resilient, clinging close to the ground so the frost could not take them too soon. In this landscape, every plant told a story of adaptation. Mosses and lichens covered rocks, painting them in muted tones of green, gray, and silver. These simple beings, ancient and enduring, created nourishment where none seemed possible, softening stone into soil, preparing the ground for others to come. Shrubs grew low, their branches twisted and sturdy, holding fast against snow and wind. Even in such harshness, life refused to vanish. Animals followed the plants, as they always do. Wherever grass grew, herds arrived, moving in sweeping arcs across the land. Their movements shaped the very earth, hooves cutting paths, grazing shaping the fields, dung feeding the soil. Life built upon life, a slow rhythm repeating across years, decades, millennia. Birds marked the seasons with their songs and migrations. In spring, flocks filled the skies, their wings beating like waves upon the air. They nested in tundra fields, raising their young in the brief abundance, before flying south again as the cold returned. Their calls echoed across valleys, haunting and beautiful, reminders that even in the most frozen times, there was music. For humans, this music was a guide as much as the stars above. The people listened not only with their ears but with their hearts, noticing every shift in sound, every silence. The call of a bird might mean fish were moving in the river. The distant bellow of a mammoth could mark the beginning of migration. The crack of ice upon water might signal danger, or the promise of a new path. Fire was their companion in this world. A single spark, carefully tended, became a source of life. Flames brought warmth against the endless chill, light against the long night, protection against the unknown. People gathered around it, telling stories, singing softly, shaping tools by its glow. The crackle of wood, the dance of flame, the drift of smoke upward, these were as much a part of the Ice Age as the snow itself. Imagine sitting by such a fire, the cave wall behind you cool and rough, the air filled with the faint smell of smoke and roasting meat. Outside, the wind howls, carrying flakes of snow across the land. Inside, there is warmth, there is the closeness of others, the gentle murmur of voices. Shadows move across the stone, echoing the gestures of hands, the nods of heads, the rhythm of the tale being told. It is a scene of quiet endurance, of connection, of belonging. Beyond the firelight, the land stretches vast. Glaciers tower in the distance, their surfaces glowing faintly in the starlight. Valleys lie in shadow, rivers glisten like dark ribbons, forests rise in silent watch. The moon, pale and steady, drifts across the sky, casting its glow upon all. Night upon night, it repeats this journey, a silver companion to those below. The people of the Ice Age lived with the moon as closely as with the sun. They marked its phases, watching as it grew and shrank, knowing when its fullness would light the night and when darkness would reign. Its cycles guided their days, their rituals, their stories. It was a reminder of the eternal circle, waxing and waning, returning always, just as the seasons did, just as life itself did, and always. There were stories, words carried gently across the fire, shaped in rhythm, remembered and spoken again. Stories of the hunt, of the spirits of animals, of the ancestors who had walked before. Stories of the stars, of the moon, of the wind. Each story was more than entertainment. It was memory, wisdom, a way of weaving the community together. Through stories, the people remembered who they were and how to live. The Ice Age taught them patience. Food was not always near. Warmth was not always certain. Journeys were long and perilous. Yet with patience, they endured. With patience, they followed the herds, built shelters, raised their children. With patience, they watched the world change around them. Glaciers advancing and retreating, rivers shifting, forests growing and fading. Patience was not weakness but strength. It was the deep knowing that life moves in cycles, that what is hard will pass, that what is lost will return in another form. The people understood this, not in abstract words but in every breath, every step, every glance at the stars. They lived it fully, and in doing so, they survived. Time itself seemed slower then, measured not by clocks or calendars, but by the rising of the sun, the passing of the moon, the return of the herds, the birth of children. Generations flowed one into the next, carrying knowledge like a river carries silt, spreading it, depositing it, building layer upon layer of memory. And the earth carried memory too. Beneath the ice, beneath the soil, beneath the stones, stories lay hidden, seeds waiting for warmth, bones waiting for discovery, rivers waiting to carve new paths. The land held its own quiet narrative, slow and enduring, written not in words but in shapes, in layers, in silence. To listen to that silence is to hear the essence of the Ice Age, not an emptiness, but a fullness too vast for noise. The stillness of snow falling in deep night, the pause of breath before the leap of a predator, the quiet of stars shining far above. These silences held weight, meaning, presence. They were as alive as any sound. And so, the Ice Age was a world of balance, between cold and warmth, silence and sound, life and death. Everything existed in relation, each piece dependent on the other. each moment part of a larger whole. To live within it was to walk carefully, to pay attention, to accept the cycles of the earth with reverence. Even now, as we live far from those times, their echoes remain. We see them in the bones of mammoths pulled from frozen ground. We see them in the cave paintings, glowing softly in torchlight. We see them in the valleys carved by glaciers, in the smooth stones polished by ancient ice. We carry them within us too, in the endurance of our bodies, in the patience of our spirits, in the quiet awe we feel when faced with the vastness of the world. The Ice Age may be gone, yet it is not lost. It is woven into the earth, into the sky, into us. To remember it is to remember the depth of our connection, the strength of our resilience, the beauty of our endurance. And as we remember, we are lulled by its rhythm, soothed by its silence, carried gently into rest. The Ice Age carried on across thousands upon thousands of years, and though the earth seemed unchanging to the eyes of those who walked upon it, slow and steady transformations were always unfolding. A river might spend centuries carving through stone, deepening its bed until it became a canyon. A glacier might creep across the land, grinding mountains down to hills, leaving behind boulders scattered like forgotten giants. The landscape was never truly still, though the changes were so gradual they could only be seen when generations looked back upon the stories of their ancestors. Within this long rhythm of time, humans continued their journey. They were wanderers still, moving with the seasons, crossing plains, rivers, and forests in search of what the land offered. Their paths sometimes stretched over thousands of miles, linking distant groups together in a great web of movement. Each migration carried not only bodies but knowledge, traditions, and language, weaving the fabric of human culture ever wider. The caves that sheltered them were like quiet libraries of memory. Upon the walls, figures were drawn, animals leaping, hunters with spears, abstract signs whose meaning we may never fully know. These images were more than decoration. They were lessons for the young, reminders of hunts, prayers to the spirits, and offerings to the mysteries of life itself. Torchlight flickered upon them, making the animals seem to move, as if the stone itself remembered the past and carried it forward into the present. Imagine stepping into such a cave. Cool and damp, the sound of water dripping faintly in the distance. The smell of smoke lingers from fires long extinguished. The walls seem alive, etched with lines and curves that tell stories older than words. Each step deeper into the darkness feels like a step back through time, into a world where humans and animals shared a closeness we can only imagine today. These caves were sanctuaries, places where the thin veil between the human and the eternal could be felt most clearly. Outside, life was always a test of balance. A successful hunt meant food, clothing, tools, and survival. A failed hunt meant hunger and risk. The hunters learned to study every sign, the tracks pressed into mud, the broken twigs, the faint smell on the breeze. They watched the animals with deep attention, moving in rhythm with their migrations, never taking more than the land could give. This balance was not always easy, but it was necessary. It was the unspoken agreement between people and the world. They lived within in those times. Animals were not merely prey. They were companions in existence, each with their own spirit, their own place in the circle of life. To hunt an animal was to enter into a sacred exchange, one that demanded gratitude and respect. After a kill, hunters often offered words, gestures, or rituals to honor the life taken. The bones were used for tools, the hides for warmth, the sinews for binding. Nothing was wasted, for every part of the animal was a gift. Families gathered in shelters of wood, stone, and hide. In winter, these shelters were lined with furs, the entrances shielded from the wind. Smoke rose through small openings, carrying with it the comforting scent of hearth fires. Children learned by watching their small hands, copying the movements of their elders, striking sparks from stone, shaping clay into vessels, weaving fibers into cord. Life was a school without walls, where every day carried lessons written in the earth itself. Seasons marked the rhythm of all things. In spring, rivers swelled with melting ice, bringing fresh fish and fertile soils. In summer, plants blossomed, berries ripened, animals grew fat on the land's abundance. In autumn, the world shifted again, leaves falling, herds moving south, people storing what they could. Then winter returned, long and heavy, a time of waiting, of stories, of quiet endurance. This cycle repeated endlessly, steady and sure. The great clock of the natural world, For the people of the Ice Age, the stars above were as important as the seasons below. On clear nights, they lay back upon the ground, looking up at the endless canopy of lights. Constellations formed patterns, each with its own story, guiding hunters across plains and travelers across rivers. The Milky Way stretched like a pale river in the sky, reminding them of paths both earthly and divine. Stars were not distant, cold fires to them, but companions, eternal guides whispering of mysteries too vast for words. Time beneath those stars moved differently, without clocks, without calendars. Life was measured by breath, by fire, by the simple rising and setting of the sun. Each day was lived fully, without rushing forward, without clinging to the past. This unhurried rhythm created a kind of peace, a steadying presence that carried people through hardship as much as through joy. Imagine now walking across an Ice Age plain. The horizon wide and endless, the air crisp, the crunch of frost beneath your feet. Far ahead, you see the silhouettes of mammoths, their immense forms moving slowly, steadily, across the grassland. The sky above glows with the light of dusk, soft shades of gold and rose fading into indigo. The world feels vast, eternal, and you feel yourself a small but precious part of it. The Ice Age was not merely an age of survival, it was also an age of wonder. Every sunrise carried the promise of beauty. Every snowfall turned the land into a canvas of quiet white. Every encounter with an animal was both a challenge and a marvel. To live then was to live in constant presence with the sacredness of life, in all its fragility and strength. This wonder did not vanish in sleep. At night, when bodies rested and fires burned low, dreams carried the people further still. They dreamed of hunts, of spirits, of ancestors. Dreams were not dismissed as illusions, but welcomed as journeys, as teachings, as connections to worlds beyond. In their dreams, the people touched mysteries we can still feel in our own quiet moments of rest. As the millennia passed, the great glaciers that had once dominated the continents began to retreat. Slowly, the earth warmed. Valleys that had been locked in ice for ages opened once more to rivers and meadows. Forests spread across land that had been barren, filling the air with the song of birds and the rustle of leaves. Animals shifted with the changes, some moving to colder regions, others adapting, some disappearing altogether. For humans, these changes brought new opportunities and new challenges. Where once they had followed herds across frozen tundra, now they learned to fish in new rivers, to gather fruits from new forests, to plant seeds in the fertile soils left behind by melting ice. Their lives were still shaped by nature, but the possibilities widened. Villages began to appear, small at first, then growing as people learned that the land, if cared for, could offer abundance. Yet the memory of the Ice Age remained within them. Even as they planted fields and built permanent homes, they remembered the long winters, the vast plains, the close bond with animals and stars. The endurance of their ancestors lived on in their stories, in their bones, in their very blood. It was a memory of resilience, of connection, of wonder. And so, the Ice Age is not truly gone. It lingers in the shape of valleys carved by glaciers, in the bones of mammoths preserved in frozen ground, in the ancient art upon cave walls. It lingers within us too, in our patience, in our ability to adapt, in our quiet awe at the vastness of life. To remember the Ice Age is to remember that we are part of something far older, far greater than ourselves. As you listen now, let these memories flow around you like a soft blanket. Let the patience of the Ice Age steady your breath. Let the silence of the glaciers calm your mind. Let the endurance of those who came before remind you of your own quiet strength. For in this long, gentle story, there is rest, there is peace, there is the timeless rhythm of the earth itself, carrying you softly, steadily, into sleep. As the ice sheets slowly pulled back and the earth warmed, the landscapes that had once been barren and harsh began to soften. Where white plains of snow had stretched to the horizon, grasses now pushed their way through the soil. Streams, once locked beneath frozen silence, trickled and then surged, carving their way across the land. The retreat of the ice revealed valleys rich with minerals, their soils dark and fertile, waiting for seeds that would one day take root. This slow transformation was a marvel of patience. Trees returned, at first scattered, then in clusters, then in whole forests that reached skyward with steady confidence. Pines, birches, oaks, and hazel spread across the continents, changing the very feel of the world. In their shade, animals new and old found places to graze, to rest, to thrive. Birds filled the air with songs that had not been heard for millennia. Life was returning in waves, soft but unstoppable. For humans, these changes meant new rhythms of living. They still remembered the cold, the endless migration, the constant search for food. But now, with rivers and forests around them, they began to linger. Camps that were once temporary became seasonal. Seasonal camps, in time, became villages. Villages, in the ages ahead, would grow into towns and cities. The seeds of settled life were quietly planted in this time of thawing. The people of this changing earth still carried within them the knowledge of their ancestors. They still hunted the animals that roamed the plains, still fished in rivers swollen with meltwater, still gathered nuts and berries beneath the forest canopy. Yet alongside this knowledge, they began to experiment. They pressed seeds into the earth and watched as sprouts rose in return. They noticed which plants grew best in which soils, and which could be gathered, stored, and eaten later. These were small steps at first, fragile and uncertain, but they were steps that would one day transform human existence. Yet even as new ways of life emerged, the old remained close. The bond with animals, the reverence for the land, the awareness of the seasons. These connections were not forgotten. They became woven into traditions, myths, and rituals, reminders of the deep history that still lay behind every human act. Stories of the great Ice Age animals, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears, were told beside the fire, passed to children who would never see such creatures, but who would feel their presence through words. The glaciers themselves became stories. The vast rivers of ice that had once carved the land were remembered as beings of power, spirits of cold and stone. Where valleys showed their marks, people saw the signatures of giants long vanished. The mountains that rose bare and sharp from the melting snow was seen as places of mystery, thresholds between the human and the divine. Every landscape carried meaning, for the memory of hardship gave weight to every gift the earth now offered. Night after night, under skies that still glittered with stars as they had during the coldest winters, humans told these stories. The flickering of firelight upon faces, the warmth of shared company, the rise and fall of voices in the dark, these became as essential as food or water. Stories reminded them who they were, where they had come from, and how they must live to survive. But stories were not only about survival. They were about wonder. They were about connection. They were about the great mystery of life itself. Imagine sitting at such a fire, long ago. The wood crackles softly, casting sparks upward into the night. Around you, faces glow in the light, eyes bright with attention. An elder speaks slowly, voice rich with memory. They tell of the time when the world was covered in ice, when great beasts roamed, when humans followed the stars to find their way. The story is not only entertainment, it is history, guidance, a way of holding together the threads of past and present. And as you listen, you feel the same calm rhythm you feel now, the steady flow of words like a river carrying you onward. The memory of the Ice Age was also carried in tools. Stone blades, shaped by careful hands, were passed from one generation to another. Spears, bows, and fishing hooks spoke of the knowledge required to live with the land. Even as new inventions arose, the old tools remained, their use perfected by centuries of practice. To hold one of these tools was to touch the skill and care of countless ancestors, to feel their presence guiding the hand. The climate continued to warm. Over centuries, the great mammoths dwindled, their herds shrinking as grasslands gave way to forests. The animals that had defined the Ice Age slowly vanished, some retreating to the coldest corners of the world, others disappearing forever. It was a quiet farewell, not sudden but steady, like the fading of stars before dawn. For the humans who had lived alongside these creatures, their absence left both sorrow and space. Into that space, new animals came: red deer, aurochs, wild boar, creatures better suited to the greener, softer lands. The people adapted once again. Where once they had hunted mammoths on open tundra, they now tracked deer through dense forests. Where once they had followed herds for weeks across endless plains, they now learned the smaller paths of animals hidden beneath trees. Life changed, but the skills of observation, patience, and respect remained the same. Humans, like the earth itself, reshaped their ways to meet what the world offered. Through it all, the The stars remained unchanged. The constellations still shone above, marking the passage of seasons, guiding the way for travelers. In them, people continued to find comfort and meaning. They looked up and saw not only light, but the eternal. Beneath those stars, they were reminded that, though the world shifts, there is always a greater rhythm holding everything together. As you listen now, you too can feel that rhythm. Imagine yourself resting upon soft grass beneath a sky full of stars. The air is cool, the night alive, with the quiet sounds of insects and distant water. The earth beneath you is steady, holding you as it held countless generations before. The stars above shine with calm certainty, the same lights that guided Ice Age hunters, the same lights that guide us still. Time stretches wide around you, and you are safe within it, carried, gently, endlessly. Forward. In the memory of the Ice Age, we find both challenge and comfort. Challenge, in the struggles of cold, hunger, and survival. Comfort, in the resilience of those who endured, in the beauty they saw, even in hardship, in the continuity of life across vast spans of time. To remember them is to remember our own place in this great unfolding story, where every breath, every step, every heartbeat is part of something timeless. So let yourself rest within this story. Let the patience of glaciers soothe your mind. Let the endurance of mammoths steady your breath. Let the quiet awe of starlit skies calm your body. For the story of the Ice Age is not a story of fear, but of survival, of connection, of peace found even in the coldest nights. And just as the earth warmed and forests returned, so too can you find warmth, rest, and renewal in this quiet moment now. The Ice Age may seem distant, a time buried beneath millennia, yet in the rhythms of nature around us today, echoes of it still remain. The shape of the valleys we walk through, carved by glaciers long ago, tells of their immense presence. The fertile soils that nourish forests and fields were enriched by the grinding of ancient ice. Even the lakes, calm and reflective, are often the footprints of glaciers that once pressed across the land. The earth itself remembers, and carries those memories in its very bones. When we step outside into the quiet of evening, when the air is cool and the horizon glows with fading light, we are still living in the aftermath of that frozen time. The breezes that pass over hills and through trees whisper of climates that have come and gone, of ages when the world was colder, harsher, yet alive with its own beauty. To know the Ice Age is to sense that the present is not separate from the past, but part of a vast continuity that stretches both backward and forward. Imagine walking along a riverbank, where smooth stones glisten beneath the current. These stones were shaped not only by water but by ice that once pressed down, breaking and scattering rock, leaving pieces behind to be rounded by centuries of flow. Every pebble carries within it a story of pressure and release, of journey and transformation. Holding such a stone is like holding a small fragment of the Ice Age itself, quiet and patient in your hand. The animals we see today are also part of this thread. The deer grazing in a meadow, the wolves moving silently in forests, the birds migrating across continents, all of them descend from ancestors who endured the cold. Their bodies carry adaptations that were shaped during those long winters. Thick coats, sharp senses, instincts to move with the seasons. They are living legacies, continuing the story of survival and adaptation that the Ice Age demanded. For humans, too, the legacy is deep. The way we gather together, the way we share food, the way we tell stories, all of these were honed in those times of challenge. In the firelight of caves and shelters, bonds were formed that ensured survival. In shared songs and dances, communities found strength and belonging. In myths of animals and spirits, people gave meaning to a world that could sometimes feel overwhelming. Those patterns still exist within us, guiding how we live and connect even now. When we pause and breathe slowly, when we sit in stillness and feel the earth beneath us, we are practicing something very old. The people of the Ice Age often lived close to silence, surrounded by snow that muffled sound, by forests that held secrets in their shadows, by skies so wide that words seemed small against them. Their listening was deep. They noticed the faintest tracks in snow, the softest rustle in the dark, the gentlest shift of wind. This attentiveness was not only for survival but also for connection. To notice was to belong to the world. In the calm of the night, you can feel something of that belonging. The gentle beat of your heart aligns with the rhythm of time itself. The slow drift of your breath echoes the glacier's long retreat. You, too, are part of this great story, part of the Earth's memory, part of its ongoing unfolding. There is no separation between you and the land, between your body and the soil from which life grows, between your breath and the air that has circled the globe since ancient days. As the Ice Age gave way to warmer times, the world grew more varied. Forests thickened, rivers braided into new paths, coastlines shifted as seas rose. Islands appeared, some connecting people across waters, others isolating them into new worlds of their own. This slow reshaping of geography guided the journeys of humans. Some followed reindeer northward, others settled into fertile valleys, others sailed across seas in simple boats, trusting the stars to guide them. These migrations, gentle and steady, spread humanity across the continents. In every new place, people carried memories of the Ice Age within them, shaping how they related to the land they found. In some places, they saw mountains and thought of glaciers, giving them names tied to spirits of cold and stone. In others, they found fertile plains and recalled the abundance that came with thawing. Always, the past traveled with them, held in story, in practice, in quiet memory. As generations passed, the direct memory of the Ice Age faded, but its influence lingered. Festivals timed with solstices echoed the cycles of light and darkness, once so vital in the frozen winters. Symbols of animals carved into stone or painted on pottery carried the reverence once shown to mammoths and bears. Even when the creatures themselves were gone, their presence endured in human imagination. Tonight, as you rest and listen, you can feel those echoes still. The rhythm of nature that once cradled ice-aged humans continues to cradle you. The turning of the seasons, the shifting of day to night, the rise and fall of your breath, all of these are part of the same endless pattern. To listen is to step into that pattern, to find calm within it, to let yourself be carried by its steady flow. Imagine lying in a meadow beneath a canopy of stars. The grass beneath you is soft, the air cool against your skin. Above, the Milky Way stretches across the sky, a river of light unchanged since the Ice Age. Perhaps in that time, someone else lay just as you do now, gazing upward, feeling the same awe, the same calm. Across the centuries, you and they are connected by this shared experience, by the unbroken continuity of sky and earth. The Ice Age was not only a time of cold, but a time of deep beauty, the shimmering of auroras across frozen skies, the quiet sparkle of snow beneath moonlight, the strength of animals adapted to such extremes. All of these were wonders that filled the world with meaning. For those who lived through it, beauty was not separate from survival. It was woven into every step, every breath, every glance at the horizon. So let that beauty rest within you now. Let it soften your thoughts, ease your body, and guide you into rest. The Ice Age reminds us that even in the harshest conditions, there is calm to be found, and life continues with grace. And just as the world warmed and flourished, so too can you allow warmth and ease to fill your own being tonight. The story of the Ice Age is not only a story of the past, but a story of cycles. The Earth has moved through cold and warmth many times, shifting slowly like the breath of a sleeping giant. Glaciers advance, then retreat. Forests spread, then fade. Seas rise, then fall. And in every cycle, life finds its way, sometimes struggling, sometimes flourishing, always adapting. This pattern has continued for millions of years, and it will continue long after us. To understand the Ice Age is to glimpse this rhythm, to recognize that we are part of something vast, and steady, and enduring. Imagine the glaciers as great rivers of time, flowing not with water but with centuries. They move with patience, shaping the land, smoothing stone, carrying memory within their icy depths. When they melt, they release what they held: water, soil, seeds, the record of climates long gone. In their melting, they give new life, new rivers, new valleys. Nothing is wasted, nothing is lost. All is transformed, flowing onward into the great continuity of Earth. You can sense this continuity within yourself as well. Your body carries minerals that were once part of ancient stone. The air you breathe has passed through forests and oceans for ages uncountable. The water you drink has circled through clouds, rivers, glaciers, and seas. Perhaps many times since the Ice Age itself, you are not separate from the Earth's story. You are woven into it, as much a part of its rhythm as the glaciers and forests, the animals and winds, As the Ice Age softened into the present, humanity grew into new ways of living. Villages emerged, then towns, then great cities. Fields were planted, harvests gathered, homes built of wood and stone. Yet beneath all of this, the old memory remained, the awareness of cycles, the respect for nature, the sense of belonging to something greater. All of these came from that long training and survival during cold and dark. Even now, when you close your eyes and rest, you are returning to that ancient wisdom. Let yourself imagine a camp at the edge of a glacier, thousands of years ago. The night is quiet, except for the distant groan of ice shifting, the low crack of stone beneath its weight. Around a fire, a small group gathers. Their faces are lit by orange glow, their voices soft as they share food, share warmth, share story. Perhaps one hums a tune, low and calming, a song carried through generations. The stars above are the same stars you see now, steady and vast, holding both them and you in their eternal embrace. The fire dies down, and silence grows. Each person drifts towards sleep, wrapped in furs, lying close to one another for warmth. The world outside is cold, but within there is peace. That peace is timeless, and it reaches you here, now, in this moment. You too are safe, surrounded by warmth, surrounded by silence, carried into rest by the same earth that carried them. The Ice Age also teaches the gift of patience. Glaciers move so slowly they seem still, yet across centuries they reshape entire landscapes. In the same way, change in our lives can be gentle, quiet, barely noticed, until we look back and see how far we have traveled. There is no need to rush. Like the glacier, you are moving forward in your own time, your own rhythm. Every breath, every step, every moment is part of your journey. As night deepens, picture yourself lying not in the present but in that ancient world. Above you, the aurora shimmers, green and violet curtains of light rippling across the sky. Around you, snow glistens like countless tiny stars scattered upon the earth. In the distance, a mammoth moves slowly, its breath rising in clouds. A woolly rhinoceros grazes near a frozen stream. These creatures live calmly, adapted to their world, part of the same pattern of survival and grace. You lie among them, safe, simply watching, simply breathing. And as you watch, you realize that the line between past and present has blurred. The stars above are eternal, the ground beneath is timeless, the air around is the same that has flowed. For ages you are part of a continuum so vast that all times are folded together. The Ice Age is not gone. It lingers in memory, in landscape, in your own body. Its calm can still reach you, and soothe you, and hold you tonight. In time, the ice withdrew, the world warmed. Forests spread where tundra had been. Animals migrated, adapted, changed. Humans grew crops, built homes, raised children in safety. Yet even as warmth returned, the wisdom of the cold endured. People remembered what it meant to endure hardship, to work together, to respect the cycles of Earth. Those lessons are within you, waiting quietly beneath the surface, ready to remind you that you too are strong. You too are connected. You too belong. Now, as you drift towards sleep, you can let go of all urgency. Like the glacier, you can allow yourself to move at the pace of nature, slow and steady, with no need for haste. You can rest in the knowledge that you are carried by something greater, the same force that carried the Ice Age into warmth, the same rhythm that turns night into morning, the same continuity that guides the stars across the sky. Breathe deeply, and imagine the cool air of the Ice Age filling your lungs, crisp and clean. Exhale, and feel the release, the letting go of all tension, all thought, all burden. With each breath, you are more and more a part of the calm, more and more at ease. The earth has always held its children, through cold and through warmth, through silence and through storm. Tonight, it holds you too. You are safe, you are warm, you are at rest. Let the memory of the Ice Age cradle you. Let its patience guide you. Let its beauty soothe you. The story continues, but for now, you may simply sleep. Rest now, in the long rhythm of time. Rest in the memory of snow and stars. Rest in the embrace of Earth itself. The Ice Age has passed, but its calm remains, and it carries you gently into dreams. The Ice Age was not only a story of ice and snow, but also of silence and patience. Imagine vast frozen plains where the wind whispered endlessly across miles of emptiness, carrying fine snow like dust across a boundless white sheet. The world, in those moments, felt still, as though holding its breath between glacial pulses. In this slow rhythm of time, life adapted in remarkable ways, shaping forms and behaviors that allowed creatures to endure in conditions so harsh and unrelenting. Consider the mammoth herds once again. Each step of these colossal animals pressed deep into the frozen soil, leaving tracks that would quickly be filled by drifting snow. The air they breathed was heavy and cold, yet it carried with it the scent of distant grasses buried beneath frost. Young calves followed their mothers closely, warmed by the bulk of their families, shielded from the wind by a moving wall of fur and bone. The herd was a living fortress, bound together by instinct and quiet communication, moving as one, to survive a season that could last longer than a human lifetime. Nearby, smaller creatures scurried, unnoticed yet vital to the ecosystem. Shaggy-coated rodents tunneled beneath the snowpack, creating warm pockets of hidden life. Their tiny breaths formed clouds that crystallized on their fur, and when predators like owls or foxes passed overhead, they froze in silence, blending with the stillness. In this way, even the smallest lives mirrored the patience of the age. The sky during these times could shift dramatically in tone. On some days, it was brilliant and clear, the sun shining on crystalline landscapes, making the snow shimmer like a sea of diamonds. On other days, endless storms rolled across the land, turning daylight into muted twilight, with sheets of snow so dense they erased the horizon. To live in such a world required not only strength, but also a kind of surrender, a trust in the cycles of Earth, an acceptance of the deep time in which all life was caught. Humans, too, found their rhythm in this landscape. Firelight flickered within caves where families gathered, its warmth carving out a fragile island of comfort against the endless cold. They wrapped themselves in furs and pressed close together, their voices soft, their stories spoken slowly, as though the icy winds beyond might overhear and steal their warmth away. To them, the Ice Age was not an obstacle but a canvas on which to paint resilience, community, and imagination far beyond what the human eye could see. The glaciers themselves continued their patient work. They carved mountains into sharp ridges, hollowed valleys into deep basins, and pressed the earth into new forms that would last for millennia. The ice was a sculptor, shaping the world without sound, moving in a rhythm that could only be measured in centuries. Each crack and groan of the glaciers was part of a slow, steady song that echoed through the bones of the earth itself. As the stars appeared above these frozen worlds, a silence greater than any storm descended. Beneath that sky, the land slept, and with it, the creatures of the Ice Age rested, wrapped in the rhythm of night, the soft glow of moonlight on ice, and the steady promise that life would endure, no matter how deep the cold, no matter how long the season. As the Ice Age lingered, the earth seemed to move in a slower rhythm, a rhythm of expansion and retreat. The glaciers would stretch forward like frozen tides, swallowing valleys and forests beneath their crushing weight. Then, as centuries passed, they would quietly retreat, revealing new ground, freshly carved and waiting to be touched by sunlight and life. This dance between ice and thaw became the great heartbeat of the planet, shaping everything we know today. On the edges of the frozen seas, icebergs drifted slowly, breaking from the glaciers with a thunder that echoed like distant drums. Yet, once afloat, they moved silently, carried by deep currents. Their towering walls shimmered in pale blues and whites, reflecting starlight in ways that seemed almost otherworldly. To ancient eyes, these floating mountains may have looked like ghostly spirits adrift upon the waters, reminding all who watched of the power and fragility of ice. The tundra that stretched across vast continents was not lifeless, but quietly alive with endurance. Lichen clung stubbornly to rocks, painting the frozen ground with muted greens and greys. Hardy shrubs spread roots deep into permafrost, waiting for the brief thaw of summer to burst into life. When the sun lingered longer, in the sky, entire valleys would soften, and fields of grasses would sway in the breeze. A fleeting moment of abundance before the cold returned. For animals, these windows of warmth meant survival, a chance to graze, to grow, to prepare for another season of snow. Imagine a great cave bear resting in the shelter of stone, its massive frame curled into stillness. Through the long winters, it lay in hibernation, its body slowed, its breath deep and steady, echoing the slow heartbeat of the earth itself. Outside, snow piled against the cave mouth, muffling all sound, while within, the bear dreamed in silence, part of the eternal cycle of waiting and awakening. Above, the night skies of the Ice Age were filled with brilliance. Without the haze of cities or human lights, stars shone with a clarity modern eyes rarely know. The Milky Way stretched like a river of silver across the heavens, a reminder to those who gazed upward of the vastness beyond their frozen world. Perhaps ancient humans, huddled by their fires, looked at those stars and wondered if the ice would ever leave, or if the earth had always been and would always remain frozen in stillness. Yet change was always on the horizon. Slowly, subtly, the Earth's tilt and orbit shifted, pulling the planet toward moments of warmth. Glaciers began to melt, releasing rivers that roared across the land, carving new paths toward the seas. Lakes formed in the hollows left behind, their waters deep and still, reflecting skies in perfect mirror. These quiet pools became sanctuaries for life, oases in a world still caught between frost and thaw. In these moments of change, life flourished. Herds grew larger, predators thrived, and humans explored further than ever before, their footsteps pressing into ground, newly freed from ice. To them, the shifting world was both a gift and a challenge, one that required balance, wisdom, and unity. With every fire lit, with every shelter built, they became a part of the long story of Earth's endurance. And through it all, the quiet of the Ice Age remained. The snow still fell softly, the wind still sang its endless song across frozen plains, the glaciers still creaked and groaned, sculpting the world without pause, and the stars still burned above, patient witnesses to the slow unfolding of time, watching as the earth dreamed beneath its icy blanket. As the Ice Age deepened and softened, the world carried on with a rhythm that was both relentless and serene. The glaciers advanced again, like silent waves pressing outward, their frozen edges grinding across the land with a patience that only time itself could sustain. They crushed mountains, carved valleys, and polished the earth beneath them, leaving behind vast plains that would one day be fertile and green. Every movement of the ice was slow, steady, and enduring, like the breathing of a giant slumbering creature stretched across continents. In the stillness of the tundra, herds continued their long migrations. Steppe bison with their great shaggy coats trudged steadily across windswept plains, their hooves leaving dark trails in the snow. They moved as rivers of life across the frozen grasslands, their breath rising in clouds against the pale horizon. Among them, calves stumbled and learned to follow, while elders led with quiet wisdom, guiding the herd to the next stretch of pasture that lay beneath the snow. Predators followed in turn, watching, waiting, never rushing, for patience was the key to survival in a world where time itself seemed to move slowly. There were moments of beauty in this frozen realm that were fleeting, yet unforgettable. A single thawing stream breaking free of ice, running clear and cold through a silent valley. The first delicate bloom of a wildflower in the brief warmth of summer, lifting its petals toward the low sun. The shimmer of northern lights across the night sky, painting the heavens with greens, purples, and silvers that danced like ethereal curtains above the snow. To the people of the Ice Age, these sights were reminders that even in a frozen world, wonder and light were always present. Humans of this era adapted not only with tools but with stories. Around fires that burned against the chill of night, they spoke of the spirits of animals, of the mysteries of stars, of the great cycles of ice and sun. These stories became a way of weaving themselves into the world, of finding calm in the endless expanse of cold. Their voices blended with the crackle of firewood, and their words floated upward into the dark, carried away on the breath of the night wind. The caves they sheltered in held the memory of their presence. On walls of stone, hands pressed pigment into symbols, and figures of mammoths and deer took shape in flickering firelight. These paintings were more than art. They were whispers across time, testaments of quiet endurance. Each mark on stone was a reminder that even as the ice pressed down, humans dreamed, imagined, and sought connection with the world around them. And outside, the earth continued its slow transformation. Glaciers groaned, rivers flowed, herds moved, and stars kept watch. Every sound was softened by the snow, every moment stretched by the patience of ice. The Ice Age was not only a time of cold, but of profound stillness, a reminder of the earth's vastness, and of the gentle persistence of life within it. To listen to this world is to hear silence with depth, the hush of snowfall layering upon itself, the distant echo of cracking ice across a frozen lake. the soft footfalls of a wolf moving through the dark. These sounds were not interruptions, but part of the great quiet symphony of the Ice Age, a lullaby sung over millennia, and so, night after night, season after season, the world remained wrapped in its icy blanket, stars above, snow below, and life nestled between, enduring, adapting, waiting for the warmth that would one day return. The long winters stretched on, but within them there was a kind of rhythm, a pulse of the earth that carried life from one season to the next. The snows fell thick and soft, muffling the land in silence. Forests stood heavy with frost, their branches bending under the weight of crystalline ice. In open valleys, the moonlight shimmered across endless white, turning the world into a vast, glowing landscape of silver shadows. Animals moved slowly through this frozen quiet. The woolly mammoth, with its sweeping tusks and thick, shaggy coat, lumbered across the snow in steady, deliberate steps. Each breath from its trunk curled like mist, vanishing into the cold night. Beside it, smaller calves followed closely, their tiny trunks brushing their mother's legs for warmth and reassurance. In this frozen age, survival was not rushed. Every step, every movement, carried intention. Like a dance performed with patience and care, the saber-toothed cats prowled at the edges of shadow, their great fangs gleaming faintly in the pale light. They did not need to chase with frenzy, for in the stillness of the Ice Age, hunting was about silence and waiting. They watched the herds with unblinking eyes, their muscles hidden beneath their thick coats, ready to move only when the earth itself seemed to pause. Predators and prey lived side by side, bound by the same rhythm, part of the same vast, breathing world. Humans, too, carried their lives forward in harmony with the ice. Fires glowed in sheltered caves, their warmth pushing back the darkness in soft circles of light. Around them, families huddled in furs, telling stories of the animals they followed, the spirits they believed guided them, and the mysteries of the stars that wheeled silently above. The flames cracked and whispered, and shadows danced gently across stone walls, as if joining the stories themselves. In these caves, artists left their mark. With pigments of ochre and charcoal, they drew lines that became mammoths, bison, reindeer, and lions. The figures seemed to move when the firelight flickered, as though alive, caught in an eternal moment of migration or hunt. These paintings were not hurried, nor loud. They were quiet offerings, created with reverence, meant to echo through time, so that long after the ice melted, the stories of these people would remain. The world itself seemed endless. Great ice sheets stretched across continents, their surfaces gleaming beneath the low sun. Where the ice gave way, tundra and steppe spread out like oceans of grass, bending beneath the weight of snow. Rivers froze and thawed in cycles. There, waters carving paths through valleys and leaving behind shapes that would last for ages. Even mountains, tall and eternal, bore the marks of ice as glaciers carved their slopes into new forms. In the night sky, stars shone with a brilliance rarely seen today. Without cities, without lights to interrupt, the heavens revealed their full grandeur. Constellations turned slowly overhead, and people gazed upward, weaving their own meanings into the patterns above. The stars became guides, storytellers, and companions, lights to dream by in the vast silence of winter. And through it all, there was a stillness that wrapped the earth like a blanket. The Ice Age was not harsh to those who accepted its rhythm. It was steady, patient, and enduring. It asked life to move slowly, to breathe deeply, to listen to the quiet song of snow and ice. As the world turned beneath the frozen sky, time stretched endlessly, carrying the promise of change, but never rushing it. The ice would one day retreat, but for now, it held the earth in its calm embrace, a cradle of cold where life endured in balance with the stillness of the age. The silence of the Ice Age was never empty. Beneath the hush of falling snow and the stillness of frozen winds, there was always the quiet hum of life persisting. The herds that roamed the icy plains moved in slow, steady patterns, their paths etched into the landscape like ancient trails carved by time. Caribou drifted across the tundra, their hooves crunching softly against the frozen ground, each step a gentle rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the earth. Woolly rhinoceroses plodded heavily through the frost, their great horns sweeping low as they cleared paths through snow. Their breath rose in pale clouds, catching the faint glow of the sun before dissolving into the frozen air. They seemed like ancient guardians, steady and unhurried, keeping pace with the slow turning of the seasons. Around them, smaller creatures darted in the shadows, hares with their white winter coats blending seamlessly into the snow, foxes curling into dens, and owls gliding soundlessly across the moonlit sky. At the edges of the frozen world, the great ice sheets creaked and shifted. Their surfaces glittered like crystal under the weak daylight, and when the sun dipped low, they turned to shades of blue and violet, glowing as though light itself was trapped within them. Sometimes, the silence was broken by deep rumbles, the voice of the glaciers as they inched forward, carving valleys and shaping the bones of the earth. These sounds carried across the emptiness like whispers of time itself, reminders of the slow power of the ice. Humans watched and listened to these changes, adapting their lives to the rhythm of the land. They moved with the herds, following the migrations that brought food and furs, learning the subtle signs that the earth offered. Tracks in the snow, the angle of the sun, the shifting of winds, all were signals to those who lived close to nature. In their shelters, they tended fires with care, keeping flames alive through the longest nights, the light flickering like a heartbeat against the stone walls of their caves. The people's stories wove together, their understanding of the world. They spoke of great spirits that lived within the ice, of animals that carried wisdom, and of stars that watched over them from the sky. These tales were not told in hurried voices, but in slow, soothing tones, repeated softly like lullabies. The rhythm of their words matched the rhythm of the fire, carrying listeners into dreamlike states where the boundary between reality and imagination blurred. And as they spoke, outside their shelters the night unfolded with quiet grandeur. Aurora lights shimmered across the horizon, curtains of green and violet swaying gently in the sky. The lights reflected off the snow, turning the frozen plains into a sea of color that rippled silently, as though the heavens themselves were breathing. For those who saw them, these lights must have seemed like a bridge between the earth and the stars, a dream that floated in the cold air of the Ice Age night. All around, the world remained in motion, though at a pace so slow it was almost imperceptible. Ice thickened, rivers carved deeper paths, and mountains shifted beneath the weight of glaciers. Life endured in harmony with these changes, adapting, adjusting, and finding beauty in the stillness. The Ice Age was not only a time of survival, but also of quiet wonder, a world vast, mysterious, and filled with moments of calm that echoed across thousands of years. In this frozen silence, the earth carried forward, holding all who lived upon it in a vast and patient embrace. The stars wheeled overhead, the winds whispered through the valleys, and the ice, steady and eternal, shaped the future of the world in silence. As the long Ice Age unfolded, one season drifted into the next with quiet patience. The glaciers, vast and shimmering, continued their slow retreat, their icy grip easing little by little. Rivers of meltwater traced new paths through the land, their steady trickling a soft lullaby to the earth itself. Valleys deepened, lakes were born, and plains stretched open, waiting to welcome the green of grasses and the warmth of trees that would come in time. The great animals of the Ice Age lingered a while longer in this shifting world. Mammoths moved like shadows across the plains, their herds smaller now, their steps slower, yet still steady. Sabertooth cats lingered at the edges of the forests, their eyes glinting in the fading cold light, while giant sloths rested beneath thinning canopies. Slowly, one by one, they began to vanish, leaving behind faint echoes, footprints pressed into earth that would harden and preserve them, bones that would one day be discovered, and stories whispered into the winds of memory. For the people of the Ice Age, the world also changed, but gently, gradually, as if time itself were rocking them into a new rhythm. Where once their shelters had been carved into snow and stone, now they built near rivers, where fish darted beneath the surface and birds wheeled in the warmer skies. The warmth did not come all at once, but touched the land in slow waves, a rising and falling of temperatures, until the deep winters grew softer and the springs grew longer. Through all of this, the skies continued their eternal watch. Stars glimmered faintly, just as they had in the coldest nights of the Ice Age, guiding travelers and dreamers alike. The auroras, with their gentle curtains of light, still rippled across the heavens, though less often now. Their magic carried on in the memory of those who had once watched them dance above a frozen earth. The Ice Age, though it passed, left behind a quiet gift. It shaped the mountains, carved the rivers, and painted the valleys that we know today. It left behind fossils that tell us of the creatures that once roamed, and artifacts that remind us of the resilience of humankind. But more than this, it left behind a story of patience, of adaptation, and of life persisting even when the world seemed wrapped in silence and snow. And so, when we think of the Ice Age, we can imagine it not as a harsh or unforgiving place, but as a vast, tranquil landscape, a place where snowflakes drifted endlessly, where stars shimmered above frozen horizons, and where life, in its many forms, quietly endured. The Ice Age whispers to us still, not in words, but in the shapes of the land, the memory of the animals, and the slow, steady pulse of time itself. As this story draws to its close, let the images of that ancient frozen world linger gently in your mind. Imagine the snow falling softly. Imagine the mammoths walking steadily beneath silver skies. Imagine the flicker of firelight inside a quiet shelter, and the calm voices of those who once told stories by its glow. Let these images carry you into rest. As the Ice Age itself now rests in the deep history of our planet, the earth turns slowly, the night stretches wide, and in this quiet, we are held by the same vastness that held the Ice Age. The same stars shine above us, the same winds move across the land, and the same patience of time carries us forward. Rest now, as the Ice Age rests. Drift with the snow, breathe with the silence, and let sleep carry you, as gently as the slow passage of centuries, into dreams as endless as the frozen horizon.